Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Coffee Podcast, your weekly blend of motivation, encouragement, education, and insight into all things medicine for junior doctors and medical students in South Africa. Welcome to episode 17. On today's episode, we take a bit of a detour from clinical medicine to discuss the tricky world of medical protection, financial services, and insurance. And there are some CPD points available for those who want to take their personal and professional development to another level. So stay tuned to this episode to find out how you can avail yourself of that great opportunity. My guest on the podcast today is Arlene Mulder, the Managing Director of Wolf, a financial services practice that aims to protect and provide insurance solutions to healthcare professionals. Arlene was actually offered a place at medical school, however she decided to pursue a different path. She now holds an M.Sc in Business Mathematics and Informatics and uses her knowledge and talent to find and build solutions that empower medical professionals with knowledge and give them access to insurance products with tech-driven solutions. With 7 years of experience in investment banking, Arlene has also won numerous awards and accolades. She was the winner of the Forbes Women Africa Technology and Innovation Award in 2019 and featured on the cover of Forbes Women Africa as one of the 20 new wealth creators on the African continent in that year. She was also selected for the International Visitor Leadership Program by the US Consulate in 2017 and is a global ambassador for She Loves Tech. When Arlene is not busy protecting the practice of medical professionals, she spends her time on a mountain bike, in her trail running shoes, ticking off her travel bucket list, or reading 3 books at the same time. She somehow also manages to be the CEO and founder of We Think Code and BIB, Africa's digital audio library. I hope you enjoy our conversation on the podcast today. Stay tuned towards the end of the interview as Wolf have given listeners of the Dr. Coffee podcast free access to their helpful online curriculum of courses for medical professionals. These courses feature legal and medical experts presenting on topics such as understanding medical negligence, informed consent, disclosures and record keeping, and what to do when you are sued, amongst other subjects. The courses are all HPCSA accredited and will provide you with up to 12 CPD points for completion. All you need to do is register for the courses using the provided Wolf voucher codes, which we will mention during this episode. And now, without any further ado, here is my conversation with Arlene Mulder.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for your time, and I'm very excited for what's going to come out of this podcast recording. I think you have a lot to tell our audience. So let's begin right off the bat. You started something called Wolf, but you have an interesting backstory. So tell me about your backstory and your journey through a master's in mathematics and almost getting into medicine.
Yeah, it's quite cool to reflect back on your life sometimes. Ever since I was a little girl, I always said I want to become a doctor. That was my passion. It was probably because I wanted to help people. I think that's why a lot of people get into medicine, always fascinated by biology. And so my entire life, I wanted to become a doctor. And then when I was a matric, I realized, please don't judge me now, but I really like math as well. And I think I was a little bit lazy. And I thought, well, if I study math, I don't really have to study that much. I just have to understand. And if I study medicine, it's like probably 7 plus however many extra years to study. So it was a very difficult decision for me. But in the end, I almost studied medicine, but I ended up studying mathematics. And yeah, I ended up finishing my master's degree. But I've always had this passion for medicine and the medicine world and what can happen there. So just very quickly, I then went into investment banking. So for 7 years, I worked at Rand Merchant Bank. And then I thought, okay, well, my passion is also education. So I left the investment banking world. It was amazing. I learned so much. But I started my first business, which was a software engineering university. So a free university where anyone, you don't even have to have a matric, study tuition free, software engineering. So the whole tech side became very interesting to me. And then 2 years ago, started Wolf. So for me, so hopefully you'll remember the name because Wolf, we're not called any 3-letter acronym or a boring insurance name. It's Wolf because it's protecting the practice. So that's how we see it. And our passion really is to support healthcare professionals who focus on the medicine side and that are extreme experts on that side, but not always on the business side and the financial side. So yeah, that's how the whole journey through investment banking to a passion for education and for business. And yeah, now we've got this niche insurance business where we look after healthcare professionals.
Wow, tremendous. What a journey. And if I can comfort you, I think medicine, if I look at all of the doctors that I work with, it looks like mathematics is definitely not our strong point. So you might have chosen a better path because you would have been so frustrated, excuse me, with the way that doctors are pulling out their calculator to work out very, very simple things. So tell us about Direwolf now. So you said it's a different approach to protecting the practice and protecting the professional individual. What are some of the things that Direwolf offers their clients and the services they provide?
Sure. So how we started is we actually started seeing how medical malpractice insurance specifically is just becoming more and more expensive. In certain cases, like for obs and gynae and spinal surgeons, it's almost becoming unaffordable for the doctors. Sure. And then the trend that has is that people either do not specialize or they leave the country, and you know, that's really bad for me as a citizen of South Africa, and it's also my passion. So we started looking at what is happening in the local market. Are there some local insurers that's providing alternatives? And that's really it was the start of Direwolf. Then we realized, but there's not a lot of services out there on the financial side that focuses specifically on the healthcare professionals. So then we expanded our offering a little bit more than just medical malpractice insurance. We also look at what is your individual need. So you need personal insurance, you need a life insurance, key man. We can go into a bit more detail on that. But if you start your own practice, you might need business insurance. Depending on what kind of doctor you are, you might have expensive equipment. So we basically do everything you need from a financial advisory point of view. And then we also added an educational element on that. So we focus on CPD accredited courses on the ethics side. I'm not sure if you're still studying, you might not have to do this yet, but there's clinical points and ethics points. And we realize it's quite difficult to get ethics points because it can't have anything kind of to do with your day job. So we have a whole series on medical malpractice on the ethics side. And we're launching a new one on cybersecurity. Oh, wow. So that's the other thing. We're looking at everything to protect the practice. So it's not just insurance, it's mainly insurance, but cybersecurity, for example, because what we're seeing is that two kinds of people are getting hacked, people with financial data and with healthcare data. So a lot of the doctors are getting hacked at the moment. So what are all the things we can offer to protect our healthcare professionals? I
think you said a lot of really valuable things there, like just speak about cybersecurity. I mean, patients share very valuable and personal information with their healthcare providers that once that gets lost, people will have a lot of vulnerable information about people. What are some of the reasons that doctors need insurance? I think this is helpful from an education point of view to explain the difference between something like negligence and malpractice, because we are taught a little bit at medical school about these terms. But honestly, if I think about my own life, if I was to set up my own business, ensuring that business is probably the scariest thing about setting up your own practice. So what are some of the things that the doctors will need insurance for?
So I think there are two main things to think about. So if you think about yourself as a doctor, so your most valuable asset is your ability to work and thereby then earn an income. So there are two things to think about. So let's start with the first one is your ability to work. So there's a couple of might be interesting to me, might not be so interesting to you, but some interesting insurance products that we could look at there. So one is, for example, key man insurance. So if you are the doctor, sometimes you have a practice, you have some people working for you. If you're not able to work and earn an income, you're not able to remunerate your staff. So that's how key man insurance works. So if you're not able to work for a period of time or business interruption, then at least you're covered for that. Then there is life insurance, obviously, and then there is death, and then there's disability or critical illness cover. So that's specific covers you can take out if you're not able to work anymore. So that's the first thing I think that's important. The second one is the medical malpractice. So in other industries, you would call this professional indemnity. So it is
Okay.
anything that happens while you are doing your day job, let's say. So in the healthcare professional space, it's specifically called medical malpractice insurance. So we could probably talk 5 hours about this, but I'll just give the high level. So basically, if there is negligence, so you need to prove that there was negligence. So if you take the reasonable man test, would someone, a reasonable man in your experience, so you might, if you're a first year practicing GP, they're not going to compare you with the best surgeon in the country. It's a reasonable man test. So did you follow everything that you were supposed to? And then was there damage done? So there must be causation and there must be damage done. So then your patient can actually sue you for medical malpractice. So, and most hospitals, you won't be able to work at a hospital if you don't have that medical malpractice cover. We've seen now that the hospitals are quite strict. They have now systems on an annual basis. You have to show, if you're working in private, you have to show that you are covered there. But what's interesting about state is, so if you work for state, so let's say something happens and a patient puts in a claim against you, and let's say you are found guilty. So then there's often a payout amount. But before you get to that payout amount, you need to have legal fees. There's often a process before that you can defend yourself. Or let's say someone puts in a complaint against the HPCSA against your name. That is publicly available as well.
Sure.
So you often need then legal assistance to assist you with removing that claim or disputing it or going through the process. So what's interesting about state cover is the claim that's put in against you is covered by state, but not all the legal fees. So we've actually got a product with one of our partners where we provide free state cover. So if you're a business-minded person, I mean, we actually really don't make money out of that, but we really want to help the doctors. So we have this free state cover that we provide that just covers your basic legal fees if you need to dispute any of these. So in a nutshell, that's the two main ones. So the one is to, if you are not able to work, to cover you for maybe it's a period, or obviously in the case of death cover, you're not able to work anymore. And then the other one is medical malpractice, if something goes wrong. And you know what people don't think about, okay, yes, the cover is paid, maybe someone sues you for 5 million rand, but it's quite traumatic for the doctors also to go through that.
Yeah.
I mean, often we see you had the best intentions and now something happens. And so there's often also counseling included in the cover that we provide. And just that assistance, someone to kind of hold your hand through the process and make sure that you know what to do next, because it's obviously not a very nice experience to go through.
So thank you for those answers. It actually prompted a couple of further questions. So first of all, you were talking about what it's like working in the state, and most of our audience would be either a medical student practicing in a public hospital or still doing internship and maybe ComServe or even MO time. I don't know that there's many registrars or consultants that listen to the show at this stage, but many of them will be kind of in the public sector with half an eye or half a foot towards the private sector. So I'm sure that they're also interested in what you're saying about you're going to need your own cover if you're going to get a job in a private hospital. So the first, I've got two questions that you prompted. So the first one is, you mentioned that if there is a claim against you with your HPCSA number or your name, and that people actually go to the HPCSA rather than to the Department of Health or to the hospital where you work at, that you'll then have to cover the fees associated with the legal costs, if I understand you correctly. Is that correct so far?
Yes. So, I mean, you don't necessarily have to get legal cover, but we would advise that. So,
yes.
Especially if it's a claim against you that is unfair and you want just some legal assistance to assist you with removing that. What I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily have to do that. I think that's why state doesn't cover you. But we provide that cover to help you because we think that is obviously a great thing to have if you have legal assistance to assist you with removing that claim. And you know what we're seeing? Sometimes what happens is patients put a claim against the HPCSA because they say the doctor was too expensive. So, I mean, it's kind of like how you tell your patient the costs up front, but once your medical aid doesn't cover it, then you go put in a claim against the HPCSA because you don't want to pay the fees. So we see that quite often, and we assist our clients to just remove those claims.
So as a young intern, working in the public hospital, does that mean I should be afraid to introduce myself to patients and say my name? Should I not put my intern number so somebody knows my HPCSA number? Or are people able to just say, oh, Dr. Fraser treated me, he put a drip in wrong and I got a bruise? And
no, look, there's quite a process for them to follow that. So firstly, I want to say no. I want to really encourage doctors not to feel like they have to now practice defensive medicine. That's kind of a term that people say. We don't want you to be afraid of those things, because at the end of the day, and speaking as a citizen of South Africa, we want the doctors to be free to do their job in the best possible way.
Very good.
So that is, that is what we would like to get right. So the way that we do that is just to say, okay, and so you asked your question now. What we also see is a lot of people, a lot of young doctors work in state, and then they start a little bit in private. So even if you're 10% in private, etc. So we have a lot of doctors like that. So then obviously your cover amount is a lot lower because it's a small amount, but you start dipping your toe into private. That's when you need the private medical malpractice cover. But what we try to help our doctors with is just to say, just get everything in place, right? Have your consent forms in place, have a complaints procedure in place. We can dig deeper into any of these if you want. And again, if you do things right up front, and listen, even me who runs an insurance company, I don't like the admin either. Like no one really likes it, right? But that's why we are there as well to help with that. But if you do things right from the start, then you don't have to worry. And if you, like I said, and I'm saying I'm being transparent, like it is free. We also don't make money out of it. I'll be honest, we hope that you stay with us. And one day when you do need cover, you come to us. But, that's why we've got the free state cover option. So then you just know you're covered. Then you don't have to worry, do I have to give out my name or anything? You can do your job to the best of your abilities, and you know that you are protected.
That's very good. And the second question that you prompted was a question about working in a private hospital. Do you need to have different insurance whether you're working as a family physician or a surgeon? Is it still specific to your industry or your specialization that you're working in? So even though you're working in a private hospital that will have its own insurance, you're still covered for your little niche, your slice of medicine, if I'm explaining it correctly.
Yes. So each doctor needs to take out cover in their personal capacity. So the hospital will cover certain things, but you need medical malpractice cover in your personal name because you are the professional that can be held liable for that. So what we do with most of our partners, so let's say if you are just a GP, then, you just say I'm a GP, but often people do various different things. So each and every doctor is underwritten, is the term that we call it, so to assess your risk on an individual basis. So you will literally tell us 20% of my time I do this, then 50% of my time I do this, or maybe then the other 30% I work in state. So it's quite a lot of information we need up front, but it is in your own best interest. I know it's, again, admin, but the more information you give us, the more, and then we assess each doctor's individual risk based on exactly what you do. So don't worry if you do all sorts of different crazy things. It's all taken into account on an individual basis.
Yeah, that's very good. And you answered the question exactly perfectly, because there's so many people who will be in a state of flux. That will be, especially as young doctors, we'll be, as you said, having one foot in private, one foot in public, and doing different things. And oftentimes you're doing what you're not necessarily qualified to do, but you're doing it to build time to what you ultimately want to do. What are some of the misconceptions that people might have? I mean, as you've alluded to, insurance does tend to be a bit of a grudge purchase, and we hate the admin, especially as doctors. We're already filling out so much paperwork. However, I think there could be some misconceptions. So what are some of the problems you commonly encounter with young doctors starting out their journey, some of the mistakes we make or some of the misconceptions we might have?
Yeah, so I think a big misconception. So there's this concept of you flag that there might be a claim. Okay, so if something happened, let's say something went wrong in a procedure, um, as the insurance company, we ask you to flag that claim.
Okay.
So I think what a lot of doctors do is they're scared to do that because they think it's going to increase their risk, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to say that's quite a misconception. Rather, I mean, you don't have to flag everything, but how the cover works is if you do flag something, even because we can go into a lot of detail here, but there's prescription periods and there's a legal, so maybe I must give a quick example. So there's a 3-year prescription period. So from the date that the patient realizes that something went wrong, there's 3 years time that they can put in a claim. But if you are not yet of legal age, you still have up until 18 plus 3 years. So if we think about obs and gynae, for example, that's why every single person who delivers a baby kind of has a 21-year risk period that they might be exposed to the risk. But the moment you actually flag that claim, you are covered. And there's a whole lot of technicalities here, claims made occurrence based, what kind of cover you have. But so I just want to say that's a misconception that people have to say they think it would reflect badly on their record if they do just flag a claim. So I just want to say, don't do that. That is not something you have to worry about. Another misconception is that I think what we often see is that the doctors that get sued, it's actually when they've done nothing wrong. Because if you did something wrong, you go and you apologize, you speak to the patient, you try to, either you redo the procedure or you make it right in some way. And I think the misconception is sometimes people just want someone to hear them. So one of the things we help our doctors to do is to just put a complaints procedure in place so that the patients have someone to call, someone to say, listen, I just want someone to listen to me. Something went wrong. Can someone just listen to me? And it sounds so silly, actually, but we've seen that just having that in place actually drastically reduces the number of claims you actually, and the same with the HPCSA. Because if someone just wants to say something went wrong and there's no one to say it to, they go put the claim at the HPCSA. So it's just something to keep in mind. Just have someone for them to call. And we actually help our doctors with this to put that in place. It's such a small little thing, but it actually makes a very, very big difference because so many of the claims we see, the doctor said, this is ridiculous. This has nothing to do with the heart operation that I did on you. And now your neck is sore. So they ignore it. And if they just listened to the patient, they would never have gotten sued. And yes, they are not actually guilty, but now you have to go through this 2-3 year process of a claim against you and the stress of it and proving yourself innocent. And they always talk about bedside manner, but bedside manner can be so broad. But just give them a place to actually air their grievances, if that makes sense.
I think that's really helpful. And it's just a reminder that, as medical professionals, we learn so much about the clinical sciences, but ultimately it comes down to how you relate to people and that soft science of dealing with interpersonal strife. Sorry, there's a truck going by. I apologize for the sound. So you mentioned that there's some educational content you're putting together and some CPD courses for health professionals. I'd really like to dive into that a little bit if you can.
Sure. So we've done our first series on medical malpractice, and I'm very happy to actually offer your listeners a voucher code to have access to these CPD courses if you guys are interested. So what we do is, I feel like after COVID, it was like death by webinar. So we just try to make it a little bit more interesting. So it's more like kind of like a TV show where I interview professionals from the industry. So we have, for example, a legal expert from Norton Rose Fulbright, where we start out with understanding medical negligence and what to do when you get sued. Then we go into a little bit detailed on informed consent, disclosures, record keeping. We dive quite deep into digital record keeping. Such a great age we're in now. There's a lot of tools we can use to make our lives easier. We look specifically at the medical malpractice insurance. How does it work? What is the difference between a mutual fund, and who are the local insurers, and some of the small nuances. Okay, if it's a local insurer, you can claim VAT and you get billed in rands. If you are with someone international like an MPS, it is pound-based prices and you can't claim VAT. It's like the small little things. And it's a mutual fund. It's not regulated by the South African regulator, which is called the FSCA. Then there's some interesting topics around social media. I thought that was very interesting. What are you allowed to put out on social media? When can you give advice? When not? Where are the risks? So we dive into that. And then we also talk about telehealth and telemedicine, which in COVID, a lot of the rules and regulations around that changed. So there's an interesting talk on that as well. And then our new series that we're launching is all around cybersecurity and all the risks around that.
That's epic. And thank you so much for offering that. I'm sure our customers are going to, our listeners are going to inundate you with people registering for the course. It seems really, really helpful. And just as you're speaking, I'm intrigued and I really want to learn more. We're coming towards the end of this podcast because our time is limited by our recording. So I want to just ask you, what is something that all junior doctors could do better? As a citizen of South Africa, you mentioned that obviously you are a citizen and that you have a heart for medicine. You kind of also have a flair for the scientific and you're still interested in the clinical stuff. So what is something that we can do better? What are we missing? What blind spots do we have?
I'm going to say something really boring, but I want to say get your admin and your everything you need in place so that you can be free to practice the medicine or practice medicine in the way that you believe is best. So what I mean by that is, I mentioned earlier, we see this tendency where people go, oh no, but I'm just going to send my patient for 5 different blood tests and this and this and this just to protect myself not to get sued, instead of doing what you actually believe is the correct treatment for the patient. So what I want to encourage you is take away that fear. So if you just have your consent forms in place, you've got your digital records in place, you've got a complaints procedure, you communicate well with your patient, then you don't have to live in this sort of stressful environment where you think, let me not do that, let me not give my name to the patients, what if someone sues me? So I would say if you can do that, and I mean, we always give the example to say, you're not going to come to me for open heart surgery. So let me help you with your financial decisions and your insurance. So we are the experts in that. So get some experts in place. There's a lot of other experts as well that we can help recommend, but get that in place so that you are free to do your job really well, because this is your expertise.
Epic. And I don't know how many times I've said it on this podcast before, but we don't know what we don't know. We have a very specialized set of skills as healthcare professionals and as doctors, even as a medical student. And we sometimes can get so locked into our own silo of thinking that we don't recognize and appreciate the skills that are available out there in other realms, other domains of magisteria that we call it, where people are able to offer advice, offer education. And that's why, again, I'm going to come back to it. I'm so excited about the CPD courses because I think you're going to make a massive difference in the lives of junior doctors in South Africa.
We hope so. That's our aim.
Awesome. One final thought, if you have anything that you want to tell us more about, if there's something that we haven't dived into enough in the podcast, is there anything that you want to tell us about?
No, I just think for me, the interesting thing is also just how technology is affecting the healthcare space. So it's not really so relevant to our conversation, but it's something that I follow very closely. And maybe just to encourage all the doctors to open your minds to the technology tools out there. As I mentioned, even if it's just cloud-based record keeping, recording your conversations with your doctors, having it transcribed through technology. So I just want to encourage the doctors out there to open your eyes to all the amazing things that technology can bring and see it as an aid to make your life easier. That would be
very good. Fantastic feedback. Fantastic advice. I don't know if we'll ever be able to pull you back into the world of medicine. Is there anything that you ever felt particularly passionate about? If you had been a doctor, where would you have specialized in?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Do you know what I find fascinating is so if you think of sort of AI type research on medicine that fights cancer, there's a lot of research that I've been reading recently because cancer, we tend to say just cancer, but it's so broad. Cancer can
Absolutely.
take on so many different forms. And there's fascinating research at the moment. So, not to go into too much detail, but how you just use machine learning and AI just to see what kind of treatments work exactly on what kind of cancer. So it kind of brings the medicine and the mathematics together.
Yeah.
So maybe in future, that's something that I would love to explore a bit more.
Awesome. Arlene, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the input that you've made into the lives of junior doctors in South Africa. I want to direct people to your websites, to direwolf.co.za. I'm sure they'll find anything that they need there. Is there any other ways that we can follow you, maybe social media? Maybe you want to give us a director there where we can find you?
Yeah, so we're also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all just at direwolf.co.za. But a lot of it is on our website. Our CPD courses are also on our website. As I said, just pop us an email, info@direwolf.co.za. We're very happy to give you a voucher code to access our CPD courses. And yeah, we look forward to keeping in touch.
Fantastic, Arlene. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop our recording here, but thank you so much for making yourself available for this podcast. As promised, here is the link for the Direwolf Edu platform shown on screen in the YouTube video as well as in the video description. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, you can also find this link in the show notes for this episode as well as on our social media. After registering, you will receive an automated email with the below episode names and voucher codes as well as a few other strategic calls to action. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode as much as I did. If you know of a consultant or senior registrar in a specialty that you would like featured on the Dr. Coffee podcast, please get in touch. The podcast's email address is drcoffeeza@gmail.com. That's drcoffeeza with no punctuation marks. We're also on Instagram and YouTube with the username @drcoffeeza. If you've got anything else on your mind, such as a request for additional topics, further information on how to engage with our guests, feedback on the show, or anything else, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Please consider sharing this episode with fellow junior doctors and medical students in your world who you think would benefit from the content and enjoy it. Thank you so much for your support.